Good evening, and welcome to Night 3, Episode 2 of College Information Week. I'm Jeff Griffa, one of the college counselors here at McQuaid, and tonight we're honored to have with us Mr. Stan Zatkowski, Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Boston College, to talk about the benefits of a Jesuit Collegiate experience. I first heard about Stan when I started at McQuaid 21 years ago, and I think we're extremely fortunate to have had a partnership with him through all those years, and before that, for that matter. Representing the prestigious Jesuit institution that Boston College is, Stan's audiences of prospective McQuaid students during his campus visits to McQuaid are arguably the largest of all of our college visits. I think that's a testament to his professionalism and expertise and commitment to Jesuit education. It's been a pleasure to work with one of the best in the business during my tenure here. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Stan Zatkowski.
Thanks, Jeff. That overwhelming introduction. Not to pat myself on the back, but a lot of what I do and my professional experience had a lot to do with my undergraduate years at BC in terms of reflection, discernment. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? Ending up in enrollment management after completing degrees in biology and philosophy. So you can see there were various transition points to get me from there to here. So hopefully some of that will be conveyed in my comments tonight. Although I do find it interesting, and I would hope that in some ways I'm preaching to the saved. The fact that you are at McQuaid and have selected this institution as your high school home in terms of your educational experience. But I'm sure that there were a lot of factors that were involved with that decision. Many of them being along the lines of, academic reputation, the value of single-sex education, that being an attraction, your own experience with current McQuaid staff and students, alums. Maybe it was athletics, maybe it was the size, and need I forget the Jesuit tradition. But I also suspect that the level of understanding of what that tradition means, maybe at the outset, certainly varied in degrees. Some got it, some were curious about it. So I'd like to expand a little bit about that understanding, and also certainly how it kind of manifests itself on a modern Jesuit Catholic campus. But if you come to our campus, there's a similar kind of sense of what this Jesuit philosophy of education means. And you would often experience that by attending one of our group information sessions. And in those information sessions, the majority of which you spend your time in a question and answer session with a panel of current Boston College undergraduates. And as you can imagine, oftentimes there will be questions about, what is this Jesuit affiliation? What does it mean? What's been your experience with it? What does it mean to you as an undergraduate? And it's funny because on more than one occasion, students will admit that they really had no idea what the Jesuit moniker meant. They knew it had something to do with religion. It had some kind of religious connotation to it. But they arrived on our campus for other reasons. Academic programs, the liberal arts tradition, the size, location, and proximity to a metropolitan area, but having a aesthetically nice, contiguous campus, Division I athletics. But many of them will say in the same breath that it may not have been central to their decision in arriving on campus, but it certainly has become central to the reason why they remain. So what does that mean? To me, in its simplest form, Jesuit education is about transitions, a journey, moving from one place to another in your life, in your mind, in your opinion of yourself, and giving you those tools that you're going to need to make that journey as encompassing, as informative, as enriching as it can be. And taking that one step further, not only your journey with discernment, with reflection, but also the eventual impact it has not only on yourself, but on others. Questions that oftentimes are avoided or are not given the opportunity to be expressed. So I figured, how do you explain that? And I figured let's go to the source, go back to the 1500s and talk a little bit about Saint Ignatius, founder of the Jesuit order, the guy who got things started, and talk about his own transition and how that kind of manifests itself through modern day programs that exist on our campuses, and talk about transitions. Here's a man who started off as a high-ranking soldier, the creme de la creme in the Spanish military. So fame, fortune, social status, mobility, living, as they say, the life of Riley. Now, I admit there may be many of you in the audience that don't get the meaning behind the life of Riley. So I admit the time shift that I sometimes deal with in my references, but hopefully somebody gets the point of what that means. But basically, he had it good. He had it well. Until that fateful battle, when his leg was completely shattered, blown away by cannon fire. His career was over. He's still alive. The question now is raised, what do I do? My life as I know it is no longer there. So he's brought to a monastery to recuperate. And in his cell, literally, the form of entertainment that he had available to him was a copy of the Bible and a copy of the Lives of the Saints. That was it. So as a soldier, he's sitting there and says, okay, what do I do? So he starts reading. And he is moved by the faith shown by the saints and their lives and what they went through and what they did and the decisions that they made. And he began to think about the more. And those of you in the audience know exactly what I'm talking about, Magis, the beyond, the more. And it's very much something from the Jesuit vernacular, being more, doing more, and reflecting on his life as a soldier, and realizing that the measures of his life at that time were kind of, checking off the box, the next conquest, the battle won. But there needed to be something else behind those accomplishments. What was left? And he began to see his worth change or be measured more in the context of what he could do with his God-given talents, but not only for himself, but for the betterment of others. How is he impacting the lives of others? So he starts off as a soldier. He now transitions to being a seeker and asking questions like, what is one's value? What is one's purpose? What is one's challenge, reason for existence? And the measurements now become very different from those he was accustomed to. For these are not easy questions, right? They kind of throw you into the deep end of the pool. There's no immediate yes or no answer. So Jesuit education not only poses those questions or encourages students to consider them, but is also going to provide you with an MO, a modus operandi, through which those answers can be sought. And that's exactly what St. Ignatius did. So he moves from soldier to seeker, and now he's developing a scholarship in the sense that, can I develop a method by which these questions can be entertained, that can form a common means through which one can discern, through which one can reflect on those questions to arrive at what would be the appropriate answers for the individual. So he develops what's called the spiritual exercises. And it's basically a roadmap. If you want to get a better handle of who you are, where you came from, where you're going, then use this experience to develop the skills that you'll need to reach the levels that you want to through discernment, through reflection. So he transitions from soldier to seeker. Now he's a scholar. And the final point that he kind of reaches is that of being a scribe, a teacher, documenting the exercises, documenting his experience, and providing it for the use of others to go through those same kinds of transitions when they're dealing with those types of questions. And what's interesting is that he was kind of a proponent. He was on a book tour, so to speak, with the spiritual exercises for about 15 years, even before he was ordained. So it was still in operation, in transition itself, in terms of fine-tuning that experience. But those were the transitions that he went through. So soldier, seeker, scholar, scribe. Now, all of what I've just said, I have to give credit, because everything I say in tonight's presentation, most of it is stolen. I'll be honest. These were words given to us by a gentleman by the name of Father Charlie Allen, who was in our office for a number of years and then went on to be an assistant to the president, I believe, at Fairfield University. And we asked, Charlie, can you give us, a quick, synopsis of Jesuit education? And he said, yeah, 4 words you remember: soldier, seeker, scholar, scribe. And that's kind of ingrained in my mind now, and I use it a lot. But I also give him credit for that reference. So how does that journey translate to the modern day Jesuit college or university? And why is this approach to education so valuable in today's society? Frankly, it's valuable because it provides the right questions to be asked and answers to which that tend to be overlooked at other institutions that do not see education as education of the whole person as part and parcel of their mission. And that's what is critical to a Jesuit experience. It's so valuable because there's so much more to be considered these days as one goes through their own discernment process. So how might this manifest itself on a college campus? Certainly this mindset of asking questions is incorporated in any classroom conversation. You're certainly going to see it in philosophy and theology, but it's going to be showing up in chemistry. It's going to be showing up in accounting, particularly in how you apply theory and its impact it might have on the lives of others, on the world, on the industry, whatever the case may be. But a lot of it also occurs, and I would guess that maybe, in a 60-40 split, that 60%, a lot of that will be occurring in your out of classroom experiences. For example, and admittedly, I'll use BC as a kind of my boilerplate example of how this manifests itself. But on BC's campus, the retreat culture is alive and well. And through that retreat experience, it gives students a taste of what this push for discernment is all about. Because you are on a journey at any college or university, and there will be an outcome, but there are so many points through that journey, through that transition, that tough questions need to be asked and answered. So to give you an example, or examples of how this works at BC, the first retreat opportunity that's offered to students is called 48 Hours, and it's directed at first-year students. And the idea behind it is to allow students to talk about, converse, question all the transitions that they're going through between high school and college. Being away from home for the first time, having a roommate for the first time, being in charge of every single minute of every single day. Mom and dad aren't there anymore, so you're the one that's making the decisions on how you use those 24 hours. Dealing with the fact that maybe you came from a school where you were the biggest fish in the pond. And now on a campus like BC, the pond is a lake, and there are a lot of big fish, some of them bigger than you, and dealing with that whole circumstance. But how do you formulate the questions to get to the heart of what might be concerning you with those transitions? that's where the retreat mindset comes into play. Another example, a little further down the road, towards the end of your sophomore year. So you've kind of done the bulk of your, basic academic work. You're in a position now to make decisions regarding major, or you've discovered that passion that you want to pursue. Call it a passion, call it a major, but you have now determined this is the direction that I want to take. So the questions become a little more specific, but it's not so much a question of, just checking off the box and saying, okay, this is the major that I want to be. What are the classes that I have to take in order to acquire that degree? But it's also a matter of getting a sense of what's behind your decision. Why is it, or how does it become a passion for you? And what do you plan on doing with it over the course of your next 2 years? And then there's kind of a final retreat opportunity. And actually, it's done through a course. It's a capstone program that we have in the senior year. And it's a course that tends to be team taught. And it's usually faculty that are coming from very, very different backgrounds. It might be English and accounting, or nursing and philosophy. That is the perspective that this course is offered, to make our students more aware of the fact that whatever decisions or questions that they have facing them, once they leave the admittedly protected environment that a college campus is going to provide over 4 years, that those questions are going to have to be answered from a variety of perspectives, not just your own, but every person, situation that a particular challenge or problem touches has to be included in the solution. So the capstone course provides you with the tools necessary to deal with those now life-changing questions and decisions that are facing you as a graduate of a Jesuit college or university. So these all kind of set up a theme that tends to permeate anything we do along these lines. And it has been, over the years, kind of condensed into 3 questions that were first developed, were the inspiration provided by a revered faculty member on our campus, a gentleman by the name of Father Himes in our theology department, who is no longer with us. But no matter where you go to school, you'll find out through the grapevine that, before you leave BC, before you leave Villanova, before you leave Holy Cross, before you leave Boston University, whatever, you have to have a course with. He was one of those faculty people. He was one of those people that everyone should have had some experience with Father Himes before they left. So the 3 questions that he kind of poses to any students that he comes in contact with, or any program that he's involved with, that's kind of sort of the backbone to what he does, are as follows. The first one is, what brings you joy? What is it that gets you excited? What is it that gets you up in the morning? What is it that you see in your life as a source of enrichment, of enjoyment? The second question is, are you good at it? So is it the kind of thing that you enjoy it, but you're also motivated to learn more about it, to invest yourself in it, to make it really become part of who you are? And then the third question, which is the kind of kicker, is, what value does this joy, this passion of yours, bring to others? In other words, what does the world need me to do? In Jesuit education, there is certainly support for students in making these transitions, but there's also an expectation of some kind of payback. Okay, you've learned a lot over 4 years at Boston College. Now, what are you going to do with it? By what measures are you going to see yourself as being successful? Let me give you an example of what this kind of means. And then I have a little short blurb, again from Father Himes, that I think really crystallizes what we tried to say, or we tried to do through our Jesuit experience. And it comes from a student, one of our panelists. Again, like I said, none of my stuff is original. Freshman student, and she came to BC. She was interested in, I think her major, at least initially, was history, but she wasn't too sure about it. And she was from an area of the country where ice hockey was not a big deal. So she goes to her first hockey game at Boston College, where ice hockey is a big deal, and was sitting there in the student section. She got there kind of early to the game, and she was watching the pregame warm-ups and that kind of thing. And she felt this presence next to her. So she looks up and she recognizes another student who happened to be part of her orientation group. At BC, orientation runs over the summer, and they break you up into smaller groups. You have an orientation leader, so there might be 10 or so students in each of your groups, and you go through a 2.5-day orientation. And during that orientation, students introduce themselves, tell people a little bit about themselves, their background, where they're from, that kind of thing. And the student asked this other student, during orientation, you described yourself as a practicing Catholic. And he said, can I ask you some questions about that? And she said, yeah, sure. So for periods 1 and 2 of the game, that's all they talked about. They didn't pay any attention to the game. BC won, by the way. I don't know who the opponent was. But his questions were not judgmental. It was, he saw it as a way to learn more about this student, about her faith, what it meant to her, what kind of foundation did it serve, how did it impact her view of the world, the decisions that she made, who she was as a person, all that kind of stuff. And it got her to thinking that this question or this conversation wouldn't occur elsewhere. And it was important to her because as he was asking questions of her, she was almost going through her own self-evaluation, her discernment. And it was the first time for her that she was asked questions. Okay, you're Catholic. Well, why? Was it just because your parents decided to have you baptized and you're Catholic? Have you really investigated that? Have you really taken a look at what your faith tradition, your upbringing means to you and how it did affect your view of the world, your values? So Father Himes kind of crystallizes that in this following passage, and I apologize, but I'm reading this verbatim, and it goes like this, quote, if you think of our education as a gift given you to be grasped, as something that you've achieved and will hold on to, if you think of your education as a training to make more money or get a better job, if you think that your education is all about your success in being able to provide for yourself and your family, all of which are great and wonderful goods, but if you think that's what's central to your education, then I must say that I think you're unworthy of your education. The reason to be educated is to teach someone else. You never fully grasp the fruits of your education until you give it away to another. The measure of success of your education is the measure to which people who never got to come to Boston College, the measure to which their lives are richer, fuller, more genuinely human because you did go to Boston College. And I'll say any Jesuit institution for that matter. That's enabling you to give something to others. And in that process, for the first time, you will fully possess it. You never own what you don't give away. And what you give away, you can never lose. In that hockey conversation, that student was giving of herself, her educational experience, to another person to learn from it. She was having a positive impact on someone, unbeknownst to her, but through offering her perspective on her own experience, she was giving that other person an opportunity to formulate, to develop his own questions about where he sees himself in that conversation. The back and forth is immeasurable. And that's what Jesuit education encourages, fosters, and provides you the tools to have those types of conversations and those types of experiences. On a Jesuit campus, your education will be valued by more than just the dollars and cents it brings to your life. You should always consider yourself as a lifelong learner, because the more questions you ask and the more questions you answer, the closer you'll get to the truth. Very, very different from the average college experience. That's the cachet of a Jesuit education, where, yes, we're going to provide you with the tools that will allow you to get that first job, get into that graduate program, that professional school, whatever direction you plan on heading. But at the same time, we hope a message will be fostered, accepted, that with the opportunity that has been presented to you over your 4 years at a place like BC, you'll use those talents that you've developed not only to impact your life, but the lives of others in direct ways and in indirect ways. It may be a conversation. It may be just the person that you are and what is observed by those who communicate with you, come in contact with you. Those are hallmarks of Jesuit education. And that's what on a Jesuit campus you'll experience in a much broader way through your undergraduate experience. So, value of Jesuit education: high standards, high expectations, but definitely a return on investment.
Thank you very much, Stan. That was wonderful. I do remember 21 years ago when I interviewed here at McQuaid, and I got to interview with Father Wroblewski, who is basically a legend here at McQuaid. And I remember he handed me the mission statement. And so I was raised Catholic. I was practicing Catholic. I went to church, and he handed me the mission statement, and I didn't really know too much about the Jesuits, other than I had one of my peers had transferred from Waterloo High School to McQuaid for basketball, so we were like a good basketball program there. But at any rate, he handed it to me, and I read it, and I was like, wow, this sounds amazing. But I didn't really fully grasp what it meant. And I'm still trying to fully grasp what it means 20 some odd years later. And it sounds like, the students that you encounter at Boston College, and I'm sure this is a shared experience for many students at Jesuit institutions, is that, there's always more to do. You talked about the modules. And the education doesn't end when you leave Boston College. And we hear oftentimes, speakers come to McQuaid who say, it's not a place that you come to, it's a place that you go from, out in the world, and to spread the word, if you will, and to do good for others based on what you're learning through your education and through your life experiences. Do you often hear students come back and share their stories after they graduate from Boston College?
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, going back to the panel, there was a question that was raised by a dad, and he said, okay, 10 years out, what are you going to reflect on most about your BC education? And I'm over in the corner thinking, oh, this is going to be interesting. And I was blown away by the students' responses. One, for example, was always living in the moment, being aware of your surroundings, being aware of what is being asked of you. Focus on the conversation. Don't be distracted. And realizing that was a huge component of his educational experience. Another person was never losing your academic passion, that you're always learning, that there's always questions to be asked, always things to be learned. In fact, if you think you know it all, then your life has basically ended, that you are always in a position to learn more. And those are the kinds of the things that the students reflected on. The point being is that to your point, Jeff, it is ongoing, because partly due to the fact that the world is always changing. I mean, look at what the entire world has gone through since 2020. Look at how the ability or inability to discuss, to have conversations has been abridged in a large degree, that we all are kind of getting into our silos and not allowing for any type of crossing of ideas, that it's the roadblock blocks are put up first rather than, well, let's see what's going on the other side of the street or the other side of the fence. In the Jesuit mindset, they're going to say, first listen, first have that conversation, first review, reflect on that person's position, and then engage in conversation. So it is ongoing. There's another priest that used to work at BC, and we asked him to define Jesuit education, and he said, it's a weird thing. He said, it's not something that if you take a course, get 3 credits in Jesuit education, you're Jesuit educated. He said, it's like being out on a night where there's a mist, and you see the mist and the lights, and you don't pay too much attention to it. But when you reach your destination and you go and take off your coat, you find out that you are soaked. Simply meaning that it's all around you and it becomes part of you, whether it is manifested in a direct fashion or an indirect fashion. But the fact that the mission, the philosophy, the journey excites you, that's part of it as well. And realizing that it is an ongoing life learning experience. But that's definitely what we hear from our students. It manifests itself in the community that exists, how alums get involved with career counseling at BC. We often highlight how they are still very much connected to the university. And it's because there's that general understanding that my charge is to use my experiences to help those that are, coming up the ranks behind me. Another way of how can I use my talents to impact the lives of others? And that's another example that we hear from our current students and the interaction that they have with alumni. And it kind of blows them away that, wow, you still believe all this stuff, that I'm just beginning to learn. And yeah, there's an investment there because they have seen the return on that investment in their own lives.
Yeah, it's something that you cannot quantify, really. I had a conversation with a student on Monday, a current senior, and he said, Mr. Griffa, I didn't really know what was happening. I went to these classes, I took theology, I went out in community service, and I did retreats and everything. But I'm starting to get it now. I'm starting to understand why I had to do, or not had to, but why I chose to do all of those things, and the deeper meaning of it all is because he was talking about some community service experiences that he had where he, went door to door out into some other neighborhoods in Rochester where some folks don't like to go. But what he learned from the people that he interacted there, and learned by, just observing the living conditions that they had, comparing them to, what he sees from his peers here and even in his own life. And he really did feel called to action, which is exactly what we hope happens from our graduates. So that was really encouraging to hear. Yeah. And in addition to that, you're talking about alumni coming back and giving some career advice to current students. I'm a co-moderator for the Alumni Career Forum here at McQuaid, and every single person that comes in and does a talk for our current students just talks about that same concept, that they were called to do more. They understood it's not just working, earning money, and being successful. It's what can I do with the talents and qualities that I have to help other people.
Yeah, so. And it's not just eureka moments that occur, because some students are also said, what, some of the situations that I found myself in, whether it be talking with a roommate or someone else on my residential floor, or these kinds of experiences where you're out and seeing what the real world is like, made me very uncomfortable. And it's in that discomfort that you learn more about yourself. And okay, why are you uncomfortable? Is it because of the perceptions that you had regarding that particular person, that particular situation? Well, alleviate that discomfort by learning more about it and getting a better handle on your feelings concerning that situation. Go beyond just the bare bones. That's the other thing that will happen at BC, is that, yes, we have innumerable opportunities for service, but there's always a reflection component. It's not just a matter of going out and, working a food bank, or maybe being a caller on a suicide hotline, but coming back and saying, what did that conversation mean to you? What impact did it have when you were talking to someone on the line who didn't see the same value of life as you saw in your own, and was willing to risk it? That's some pretty heavy stuff. And it does provide an opportunity for that conversation, but you have to work through it. And that's why, again, we provide the tools for students to be in a position and be strong enough in who they are to deal with those situations.
Yeah. And so kind of keeping with somewhat of this theme, but I'm thinking about students, and people like myself who were not Jesuit educated, but ended up in Jesuit-y kind of fields, if you will. Do you notice a difference? I guess even, during the application process and even through the student's experience, are there differences between students that are Jesuit educated and are not?
Yes, in varying degrees. Some students will often say, well, I went to a Jesuit high school. Does that help me in the admissions process? They're pretty straightforward in asking that question
all the time.
And I'll say, yes, if you present yourself in a way that you have not a complete, but a better understanding of what that means. That it's not just because you went to a Jesuit high school, you get an extra 5 points. It's, being involved with a certain ministry, to use, in our case, the BC supplement, and our questions are very, very Jesuit oriented. How you answer those questions. If I get a sense of, okay, this guy or gal gets what we're all about. There's one question about conversation partners. Well, who you select, but more importantly, what are the types of conversations that you have? And those being important to you, okay, you're going to do pretty well on this campus because you get it in terms of how important those things are. Another question about stereotypes and perceptions, and realizing that you can't just go with immediate impressions and make an assessment, a judgment, a conclusion without investigating further, and realizing that your perceptions not only impact you, but impact others. There's another question about selecting a text. We have all of our freshmen read the same text. And then at convocation in the fall, when they arrive on campus, we have the author of that text come and they have a conversation with the first year students. And some of the texts in the past have been John McCain's book when he was senator. Former President Barack Obama was another one. Bruce Springsteen was another one. But the idea behind those books was to talk about their life experiences, what they learned, their discernment, their journey, their transitions. So pick a text where I'm getting that same kind of impact, or you would see that as of being of value to others to read that book. One of the popular selections has been the book called Educated, and it was about this girl who, because of her family's very traditional religious upbringing, she was not allowed to have access to educational opportunities. Went through the whole process. She earned her doctorate eventually, but it was basically leaving the family in that environment and going through that whole transition, stereotypes, the glass ceiling for females, all that kind of stuff. So students who select that see that as being, a stereotype that has to be worked through, social and cultural obstacles. Again, using that question, we get a sense of the students' buy-in and understanding, maybe in a limited fashion, of what we're all about. So yes, to answer to your question, if we get that sense from someone that they've had experiences that have opened their eyes to what Jesuit education is all about, absolutely, it does have an impact on our decisions. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. And about curriculum. So I've heard from other Jesuit institutions that there's like a concerted effort to kind of weave, the Jesuit underpinnings, if you will, throughout every course, every major in some form or fashion. Is that something that happens at Boston College as well?
Absolutely. We have a core curriculum. I'll give you one prime example of this, and it's been in vogue since the mid to late 70s. It's called the Pulse program. And two of our core requirements are 6 credits in philosophy, 6 credits in theology. You can take them separately. But we figured, would it be interesting if we kind of put the two together and then added a service component to it? So the whole scope of the program is that you take your Pulse course, which covers traditional works in philosophy and theology. So you might be reading St. Augustine's Confessions or Plato's Republic or something like that. And let's say the conversation in the classroom, the focus is, from a classical perspective, from a theological perspective, what defines a just society? Okay, great topic, big topic. But then we'll add to that 10 to 15 hours of service work in the city of Boston. So you spend the afternoon at Rosie's Place, which is a shelter for homeless women, and you're talking to a mom and her 2 kids who don't know where they're going to be spending the night. That puts a different spin on the conversation of what is a just society. That permeates through all of our coursework. In our core curriculum as well, we have what's called, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the courses. Shoot, it'll come back to me, but it's a team taught course. And there's one, for example, that covers your social science and your natural science requirement. And the focus is on climate change. So you hear from the science side about climate change, ozone, carbon dioxide levels, all those things. And let's say off that course, you come to a decision that, okay, probably one of the best ways to affect or to ameliorate climate change would be to shut down the coal industry. Great idea. But then the economists will come in and say, that's great from a science perspective, but what are you going to do for the thousands of people who rely on the coal industry for their livelihood? Mm-hmm. Discernment, reflection, bigger scope of your perspective on the problem. So that permeates a lot of what's going on in our coursework. We have a professor from our history department right now who's actually on sabbatical because she's doing a book tour. And her book is basically focusing on the current state of affairs in terms of democracy, the Constitution, etc. And the scope of her research is not only talking about the historical perspective on what's been going on in our world, but taking it to the next level, the more, what should we be doing about it? What should we be focusing on? So it's not just a matter of knowing what happened in 1812 or 1865 or 1902. It's how does that affect current view of the world, and in turn, how it may impact future decisions, future concerns. So there's always that expansion of the raw knowledge and its application. So it's definitely something that permeates what we do on our campus in all phases of academia. And I think that's one of the kind of points when we're talking to faculty in terms of faculty hires. It's not just what research have you done? How many publications have you produced? But what are the implications? What are the long-range aspects of your own professional career where you're going to engage undergraduates to not only learn their stuff, but learn about its implications and the value of that information and how they in turn interact with their community and bringing that to the fore. So that's definitely one aspect of our faculty review, tenure decisions, all those kinds of things.
I love it. Hiring contemplatives in action, as the phrase goes.
Yeah, it's I mean, we're a major university, we're a tier 1 research institution, so that's certainly going to be an aspect of the faculty, but basically we give them the charges. We want our students to get as excited about what you are doing as you are. And not just seeing it as, again, a check off of the box, but its implications, its applications. And as we give the charge to our students, go set the world aflame, what are you going to do to affect some positive change on the community which you find yourself? Again, and using the opportunities that you've been granted to affect the lives of others in a positive way.
Thank you. Stan, I know you're in the midst of reading applications, and once again, I appreciate your time so much, and all of your great words of wisdom. But I do have one more question for you, if that's okay. Are there any just last tips that you might want to give our students and families as they're embarking on this college search and application process?
Yeah, I think oftentimes the wrong questions are asked in the process. Where are you going to school should be more of why you're going to a school, and not focus on where everyone else is going. Oftentimes, excuse me, students apply to schools because, well, I know, 3 of my friends are applying there, so it must be pretty good. But it may be the worst school for you. This is an individualized decision. It's a journey. It's a transition. So you need to do your homework and not only look into what academic programs are available, but look as you're visiting a school at the people around you. Look at how they interact with each other. Are you going to feel comfortable there, but not comfortable in a sense of not being challenged, but comfortable in people having a similar mindset that are willing to take academic risks if you're so inclined. Maybe instead of going through the formal admissions information session, certainly do that, but spend some time in a cafeteria and just plop yourself down at a table and say, I'm a student thinking about applying here. Give me your, good, bad, and ugly about this institution. You'll be amazed at how honest and how thought-provoking the responses are going to be from the students. This is your journey. It's not your best friend's journey. And don't get caught up in, U.S. News and World Report gets a lot of criticism, and much of it is appropriate. But don't just say, well, I'm only going to apply to the top 35, because number 36 or number 37 might be the best place for you. Certainly, use the guides as you see fit, but they are not the be all or end all. They are not the Bibles in this process. So make it as individualized as you can. Don't get anxious about the application process. Be honest. Tell us your story. But never write your essay with the mindset of what does the admissions office want to hear, because you may be totally wrong. Give us what you think is important in your life and what we need to know about you, and answer those questions accordingly. It's an exciting process. It can be fun, but make it your own. That's the most critical thing.
Amen. Those are great words of wisdom.
In the Jesuit tradition.
Well, thank you once again, Stan, for a wonderful presentation,
My pleasure.
talking about Jesuit education, and as well as giving us some insight into Boston College, a wonderful place. And I think, again, we're very fortunate to have had you here. And I think that anybody who's watching will definitely benefit from the information that you provided for us. So once again, I appreciate you spending the time with us and sharing your expertise.
Great. Thank you very much. Enjoy your fall, your upcoming holiday season. And for you seniors, March and April will be here soon enough. Take your time, take a deep breath, and enjoy the ride.
Great. Thank you.
All right.